Behind every great leader, there is often a story untold. A voice that shapes decisions, guides morality, and influences the course of history without ever holding formal power. For John Adams, the second President of the United States, that voice belonged to Abigail Adams. A woman of sharp intellect, unshakable moral clarity, and remarkable foresight, Abigail's influence stretched from the Revolutionary War to the halls of the White House. Welcome to my channel Words of Time, and today, we uncover the life of Abigail Adams, the advisor, the advocate, the partner who quietly helped shape a young nation. When we think of the early leaders of the United States, names like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams immediately come to mind. Yet, behind these towering figures often stood partners whose influence, though less publicly recognized, was critical in shaping the course of the nation. One of the most remarkable of these figures is Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, the second President of the United States. Abigail was far more than a supportive spouse. She was an advisor, confidant, and chronicler of the emerging American identity. Her letters and insights offer a window into the early American presidency, shedding light on both political and personal challenges that John Adams faced during his career. To understand John Adams' presidency fully, one must understand the role Abigail played, not only as a First Lady in an era before the role had a formal definition, but also as a woman whose intellect and judgment helped shape some of the decisions that defined the early republic. Abigail Adams was a highly educated and intellectually curious woman, whose insights and judgment extended far beyond the domestic sphere. She read widely in philosophy, history, and politics, and developed exceptional writing skills, which she used to maintain extensive correspondence on matters ranging from household affairs to governance and diplomacy. In her letters, she offered guidance, challenged ideas, and encouraged consideration of justice, morality, and the welfare of ordinary people. Living during a period of revolutionary change, Abigail witnessed firsthand the social and economic effects of war and political upheaval, giving her a unique perspective that informed her advice. Beyond her political influence, she managed the household, oversaw finances, and raised children, grounding her understanding of public policy in practical realities. Through her letters and actions, Abigail Adams emerges not only as a participant in history, but as a chronicler of the early republic, whose intellect, resilience, and moral clarity helped shape the course of the nation. Abigail Adams, born Abigail Smith on November 22, 1744, in Weymouth, Massachusetts, entered the world in a time of social and political ferment in colonial America. She was the daughter of William Smith, a Congregational minister, and Elizabeth Quincy Smith, a woman from a prominent Massachusetts family. Her family lineage connected her to several notable figures of colonial New England, embedding Abigail in a culture steeped in civic responsibility, moral duty, and education. From the very beginning, Abigail's upbringing emphasized the importance of character, intelligence, and spiritual awareness, qualities that would become hallmarks of her personality and guide her through her influential life. Growing up, Abigail was exposed to both the privileges and challenges of 18th-century New England society. Her father, though deeply committed to his ministerial duties, encouraged his children to think critically and engage with ideas beyond the immediate concerns of daily life. This was not a common approach for girls of her era, as formal education for women was limited and often focused on domestic skills rather than intellectual development. Nevertheless, Abigail's parents recognized her curiosity and intellect, nurturing her love of reading and learning. She devoured books on history, philosophy, and moral treatises, and she learned to write with precision and clarity, a skill that would later allow her to communicate her thoughts with influence and authority. Abigail's early education was largely self-directed. She did not attend formal schools as boys of her age did, but she made up for this through voracious reading and careful study. She explored literature, religious texts, and essays on government and society, equipping herself with knowledge that extended far beyond the traditional confines of female education. Her familiarity with the writings of classical philosophers, Enlightenment thinkers, and political theorists gave her a rare perspective on civic responsibility and governance, one that she would eventually share with her husband, John Adams. This foundation of learning was crucial, as it allowed her to participate meaningfully in political discussions at a time when women's voices were often excluded from formal debate. Beyond formal learning, Abigail developed a strong sense of moral and ethical responsibility during her youth. The The Puritan values of her family emphasized integrity, honesty, and service to others. Abigail was taught that intelligence and moral judgment must work in tandem. Knowledge alone was not sufficient without ethical application. This dual emphasis on intellect and morality shaped her character, making her not only a perceptive thinker, but also a compassionate advisor who considered the human consequences of political decisions. It also instilled in her a confidence to voice her opinions, even in a society that often dismissed the contributions of women in public life. Abigail's childhood experiences were also shaped by the realities of life in colonial America. She witnessed economic challenges, social inequalities, and the political tensions that gradually escalated into the American Revolution. These experiences sensitized her to the struggles of ordinary people, providing her with a pragmatic understanding of society. She was keenly aware that laws and political decisions were not abstract concepts but factors that directly impacted the lives of families, farmers, merchants, and communities. This awareness became a key feature of her advice to John Adams, as she often reminded him to consider the practical effects of policy on the population at large. Abigail's personality began to emerge in these formative years. She was intelligent, independent, and observant, with a strong sense of curiosity about the world beyond her immediate surroundings. She possessed a natural wit and an ability to reason through complex issues, qualities that would make her an effective communicator and advisor. At the same time, she was deeply empathetic, capable of understanding and responding to the needs and emotions of others, a trait that enhanced her role as a confidant and counselor within her marriage, and later, in the political arena. Her upbringing also instilled in Abigail a deep appreciation for family bonds and partnerships. She was close to her parents and siblings, learning the importance of mutual support, loyalty, and responsibility within a household. These lessons would later inform her approach to marriage with John Adams, where she emphasized collaboration, respect, and shared responsibility. Her early experiences taught her that influence often came not through formal authority, but through intellect, counsel, and moral conviction, tools she would wield effectively throughout her life. It was during her teenage years that Abigail's intellectual and moral inclinations began to crystallize into a vision of her own role in the world. She became acutely aware of the limitations imposed on women, yet she refused to be constrained entirely by them. Through reading, reflection, and observation, she developed a perspective on women's potential contributions to society, particularly in the realm of moral and political guidance. This early awareness would later manifest in her famous correspondence with John Adams, where she urged him to consider the rights and welfare of women as the new American government took shape. By the time she reached adulthood, Abigail had cultivated a rare combination of intelligence, moral clarity, and practical skill. She was ready not only to manage her own household, but also to engage meaningfully with the pressing issues of her time. These qualities made her an ideal partner for John Adams, whose political ambitions and public responsibilities required a collaborator who could think independently, offer sound advice, and understand the broader implications of his decisions. Abigail's early life also provided a model for resilience and adaptability. Growing up in a period of social and political change, she learned to navigate challenges with composure and insight. These traits would become crucial during the Revolutionary War and John Adams' long absences, when she managed family affairs, faced financial uncertainties, and maintained correspondence that influenced the future of the nation. Her formative years thus prepared her for a life in which personal courage, intellect, and moral conviction would intersect with the highest levels of political influence. Abigail Adams' early life was marked by education, moral formation, and the development of an independent, thoughtful character. She emerged from her childhood not only well prepared to run a household, but also equipped to participate in the intellectual and political currents of her time. Her upbringing instilled in her a sense of responsibility to family, community, and nation, a sense that would underpin her partnership with John Adams and shape the presidency he would one day lead. Understanding these early influences is essential to appreciating her later impact, as it becomes clear that Abigail's guidance, insight, and moral vision were rooted in the formative experiences of her youth. In 1764, at the age of 20, Abigail Smith married John Adams, a young lawyer and rising political figure in Massachusetts. Their union was remarkable for its foundation in mutual respect, intellectual equality, and shared values, a rarity in 18th-century America, where marriages were often arranged primarily for social or economic convenience. From the beginning, Abigail and John viewed their relationship as a partnership, one in which personal affection and intellectual engagement went hand in hand. This partnership would become the cornerstone of both their personal happiness and their combined influence on the political life of the emerging United States. The courtship between Abigail and John was deeply rooted in friendship and mutual admiration. John was drawn to Abigail's intelligence, wit, and moral clarity, while she admired his dedication, principle, and vision for the colonies. Letters written during their courtship reveal a dynamic interplay of affection, humor, and intellectual debate. Even before their marriage, Abigail displayed a confidence in expressing her thoughts, a trait that John valued highly and would continue to rely upon throughout his career. These early exchanges laid the groundwork for a lifetime of correspondence that would later serve as both personal support and political counsel. Marriage for Abigail and John Adams was not merely a private arrangement. It was also a collaborative enterprise that combined domestic responsibility with shared intellectual and political engagement. Abigail quickly assumed management of household affairs, a role that required organizational skill, practical judgment, and resilience. She oversaw the farm, managed finances, and attended to the welfare of their family, all while maintaining her own intellectual pursuits. These responsibilities, while typical for women of her time, were executed with such skill and diligence that they allowed John to pursue his legal practice and eventually, his political ambitions with confidence that his household was secure. One of the most significant aspects of Abigail and John's marriage was their extraordinary correspondence. Letters became the lifeline of their relationship, especially during periods of prolonged separation. John's legal and political work often took him away from home for months or even years, and Abigail used letters to communicate not only her personal thoughts and emotions, but also her perspectives on political matters. These letters reveal a relationship that transcended traditional marital roles, with Abigail serving as both confidant and advisor. She provided thoughtful commentary on current events, legislative developments, and moral considerations, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of political affairs that few women of her era could claim. The depth of Abigail's influence on John Adams is evident in the content and tone of their correspondence. She did not shy away from offering candid opinions, even when they challenged his views. For example, she was vocal about her concerns regarding the treatment of women and the marginalized in the fledgling nation, famously urging John to remember the ladies, as he and other founding fathers drafted laws and policies. While the language of her letters was polite and measured, the underlying message was one of moral urgency, reflecting her conviction that justice and fairness should extend to all members of society. John, in turn, took her counsel seriously, often reflecting on her insights and allowing them to shape his decisions. Abigail's role in the marriage was also marked by her practical wisdom and strategic foresight. She understood the demands of public life and the pressures associated with political leadership, and she offered guidance that was both pragmatic and principled. Whether advising John on matters of diplomacy, legislative priorities, or the management of their household, she combined moral judgment with keen observation of human behavior. Her ability to anticipate challenges and provide reasoned solutions made her an indispensable partner, not only in their personal lives but in John's political career. Beyond political and domestic matters, their marriage was characterized by mutual emotional support. The life of a public figure in colonial America was fraught with uncertainty, danger, and long periods of separation. Abigail's letters often provided comfort and encouragement, reinforcing John's sense of purpose and moral duty. She celebrated his successes, offered perspective during failures, and reminded him of the importance of integrity in both private and public life. This emotional support strengthened John's resolve and contributed to his capacity to navigate the complex and often contentious world of revolutionary politics. The marriage also fostered a climate of intellectual engagement. Abigail and John regularly debated ideas related to governance, philosophy, and the role of citizens in a republic. These discussions, whether conducted in person or through letters, allowed both partners to refine their thinking and expand their understanding of the political and social challenges facing the colonies. Abigail's perspective was particularly influential because it combined intellectual rigor with practical insight. She considered the human consequences of policy, the needs of families, and the moral implications of political decisions. This combination of intellect and empathy made her guidance uniquely valuable. Their marriage, however, was not without its challenges. Long absences due to John's legal and political duties required Abigail to manage the household alone, often under difficult circumstances. She faced financial constraints, social pressures, and the responsibilities of raising children, all while maintaining her intellectual and emotional connection with her husband. These challenges, though demanding, further demonstrated her resilience, organizational skill, and capacity for leadership. In managing these responsibilities effectively, Abigail not only supported John's career, but also developed the skills and confidence that would later enable her to advise him on matters of state. Another dimension of their partnership was the shared sense of civic duty. Both Abigail and John were deeply committed to the ideals of the emerging nation. They believed in the importance of justice, morality, and responsible governance. Abigail's upbringing and education had instilled in her a strong sense of ethical responsibility, and she brought this perspective into her marriage, influencing John's approach to politics. Whether through discussions about the revolution, the drafting of laws, or the treatment of ordinary citizens, Abigail consistently emphasized the moral and practical dimensions of leadership. Importantly, their correspondence also reflected Abigail's early awareness of gender dynamics. She recognized the limitations placed upon women in the political sphere, but refused to remain silent. Her letters contain appeals for recognition, fairness, and moral consideration, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of social and political structures. This early advocacy, combined with her personal support and political insight, positioned her as a partner whose influence extended far beyond the domestic sphere. The marriage of Abigail and John Adams illustrates how personal partnership can shape public life. Through affection, intellectual engagement, moral guidance, and practical management, Abigail became an indispensable figure in John's life and career. Their relationship exemplifies how collaboration between spouses can extend into the political realm, creating a dynamic in which personal insight informs public decisions. As John Adams' political responsibilities expanded, Abigail's role as advisor, correspondent, and confidant grew increasingly central to the success of both his career and the broader goals of the nation. Abigail's marriage to John Adams was a model of partnership, intellectual collaboration, and mutual support. It laid the foundation for her later influence during the Revolutionary War and John's presidency. The skills, values, and perspectives she developed in her early life, education, moral clarity, independence, and empathy, found expression in this marriage, where they could shape political thought, provide practical counsel, and sustain a household under challenging circumstances. The outbreak of the American Revolution in the 1770s brought both unprecedented challenges and opportunities for Abigail Adams to demonstrate her intellect, resilience, and moral vision. With John Adams deeply involved in the Continental Congress and later diplomatic missions abroad, Abigail assumed responsibilities that went far beyond the traditional domestic sphere. She managed the household, oversaw family finances, raised their children, and maintained correspondence that was not only personal but politically insightful. The revolution tested Abigail's organizational skills, emotional endurance, and political acumen, allowing her influence on her husband and the emerging nation to grow in ways that few women of her era could imagine. One of Abigail's primary responsibilities during this period was managing the household in John's absence. John's duties often required him to be away for extended periods, sometimes months or even years. Abigail had to maintain the farm and the family home, ensure that their children were cared for, and handle finances during a time of economic instability caused by war. These tasks demanded practical skill, foresight, and a remarkable capacity for multitasking. Beyond the logistics of domestic management, Abigail also had to maintain morale within the family and provide a sense of stability amid the uncertainty of wartime life. Her ability to do so reflected both resilience and leadership, qualities that would later define her influence during John Adams' presidency. While managing the household, Abigail also became a political advisor to her husband. Their letters from this period demonstrate that Abigail was deeply engaged with the political issues of the day. She offered commentary on legislative developments, debated the merits of various policies, and expressed opinions on the conduct of the Continental Congress. Abigail was particularly attentive to the social and moral consequences of political decisions. For example, she frequently reminded John to consider the welfare of ordinary citizens and the ethical implications of leadership choices. Her letters often combine practical advice with moral counsel, illustrating her unique ability to integrate domestic concerns with national policy. One of the most famous examples of Abigail's advocacy during the Revolution is her letter urging John to remember the ladies, as the new nation's laws and governance structures were being established. While this plea was partly humorous, it also reflected a serious concern for women's rights and representation. Abigail argued that women deserved legal protections and respect within the new society. Although her suggestions were not immediately adopted, the letter stands as an early testament to her forward-thinking views on gender equality and her willingness to challenge societal norms. It highlights her courage, intelligence, and commitment to justice, qualities that informed her advice on a range of political matters. Abigail's political insight extended beyond gender issues. She was also attentive to matters of foreign affairs, diplomacy, and governance. Her letters reflect an awareness of the broader international context, including the actions of Britain, France, and other European powers. She commented on the progress of the war, the strategies of the Continental Army, and the debates within the Congress. Abigail's perspective was informed by both moral reasoning and practical observation. She was acutely aware of the pressures facing leaders like John Adams, and offered guidance that balanced principle with pragmatism. In addition to her advisory role, Abigail provided emotional support that was crucial to John Adams' ability to navigate the turbulent political landscape. The Revolutionary era was marked by uncertainty, danger, and intense personal sacrifice. Abigail's letters often contained encouragement, reassurance, and reminders of the larger purpose of their efforts. She celebrated John's successes and offered solace during setbacks, helping him maintain focus and resilience. This emotional dimension of her correspondence underscores the depth of their partnership, illustrating how personal support and political advice were intertwined in their relationship. Abigail's observations during the Revolution also provided insight into the social and economic realities of the colonies. She documented the hardships faced by families, the challenges of sustaining communities during wartime, and the shifting dynamics of social life. These observations allowed her to offer John guidance grounded in practical reality, reminding him that political decisions had direct consequences for the lives of ordinary people. Her attention to these details made her counsel invaluable, as it combined a moral lens with a clear understanding of the lived experiences of citizens. Despite the distance and pressures, Abigail maintained a dynamic intellectual partnership with John. They debated issues ranging from the structure of government to the moral obligations of leaders, exchanging ideas with both rigor and affection. Abigail's intellect was not passive. She actively engaged with political philosophy, revolutionary ideals, and the emerging principles of the new nation. Her ability to contribute substantively to these discussions, often from thousands of miles away, demonstrates the remarkable scope of her influence. Abigail also took on the role of chronicler and commentator. Her letters provide historians with a rich record of life during the Revolutionary era, offering perspectives that are both personal and political. Through her observations, we gain insight into the experiences of women, families, and communities during wartime, as well as the thoughts and concerns of one of America's earliest political advisors. Abigail's writings illustrate how personal correspondence can serve as a powerful tool for shaping public understanding and preserving historical memory. The period of the Revolution also emphasized Abigail's resilience in the face of adversity. She navigated financial pressures, social responsibilities, and the anxieties associated with wartime separations. Her ability to manage these challenges without complaint, while simultaneously engaging in intellectual and political discourse, reflects her strength of character and adaptability. These qualities would continue to define her role during John Adams' presidency, when the demands of public life became even more complex and public scrutiny intensified. Abigail's influence during the Revolutionary era was not limited to John Adams. Through her letters, she indirectly shaped the perspectives of other leaders, documented the evolving social landscape, and provided a model of female engagement in public life. She demonstrated that women, even without formal political power, could exert meaningful influence on the course of events through intellect, moral reasoning, and strategic communication. Her example challenged contemporary assumptions about gender and politics, setting a precedent for the active participation of women in shaping public life. Finally, Abigail's experiences during the Revolution reinforced her philosophical and moral convictions. She consistently emphasized the importance of justice, ethical leadership, and consideration for the well-being of all citizens. These principles informed her advice to John Adams and shaped her perspective on governance, diplomacy, and the responsibilities of leaders. Abigail's moral clarity, combined with her practical intelligence, made her an indispensable partner in a period of profound political transformation. The American Revolution provided a stage for Abigail Adams to exercise her intelligence, judgment, and moral vision in unprecedented ways. She managed the household, advised her husband, documented social realities, and offered emotional support, all while navigating the uncertainties of wartime life. Her influence during this period laid the foundation for her later role as a First Lady and political advisor during John Adams' presidency. The skills, insights, and resilience she demonstrated during the Revolution illustrate the depth of her partnership with John and the significance of her contributions to the early American Republic. As the Revolution drew to a close and John Adams assumed higher responsibilities in the nascent government, Abigail's role evolved further. She transitioned from managing the household under wartime conditions to advising a president in the early years of the United States, a role that required both political insight and social acumen. When John Adams assumed the presidency in 1797, Abigail Adams stepped into a new phase of her life, one defined by public scrutiny, social responsibility, and continued influence behind the scenes of the executive branch. As the second First Lady of the United States, Abigail occupied a role that was largely undefined at the time, yet she approached it with the same intelligence, moral clarity, and practical insight that had characterized her correspondence and partnership with John throughout their marriage. Her impact during his presidency extended beyond ceremonial duties. She was a trusted advisor, a chronicler of the nation's political climate, and a moral compass for the president himself. One of the most immediate aspects of Abigail's role was her position as a social and diplomatic figure. The White House had only recently been completed, and the expectations of a president's wife were informal but significant. Abigail hosted gatherings, received foreign dignitaries, and maintained the household in a way that reflected both elegance and practicality. Through these interactions, she indirectly influenced political discourse by fostering relationships, facilitating conversations, and offering guidance to visitors and officials. Her ability to navigate the social intricacies of Washington politics enhanced her husband's presidency, projecting an image of stability, dignity, and intelligence. Abigail's political advice continued to be a central component of her influence. Though women did not hold formal political power, Abigail wielded significant impact through her correspondence. She wrote John letters filled with reflections on domestic and foreign policy, appointments, and legislative matters. Her counsel was thoughtful, grounded in both principle and practical observation. For example, she urged John to consider the moral implications of decisions affecting ordinary citizens and highlighted the importance of justice in governance. Her advice was often candid, demonstrating her willingness to critique and challenge her husband when necessary. A key aspect of Abigail's influence was her ability to observe and interpret political developments from a distance. Even when John was engaged in high-level decision-making, Abigail had a keen sense of the broader social, political, and economic environment. She commented on the public mood, the reception of policy decisions, and the behavior of political figures. This insight allowed her to provide advice that was both strategic and grounded in the realities of public life. For John Adams, having a partner who could offer such nuanced perspective was invaluable, especially in an era of limited communication and intense political partisanship. Abigail's letters during the presidency reveal a woman deeply concerned with the ethical dimensions of governance. She consistently emphasized integrity, fairness, and moral responsibility. For example, she reminded John to consider the human impact of his policies, advocating for the welfare of citizens and urging sensitivity to social inequalities. Her moral guidance extended to diplomatic matters as well, where she encouraged prudence, honesty, and ethical conduct in interactions with foreign powers. In these ways, Abigail served as both a practical advisor and a moral conscience for the president. The presidency also highlighted Abigail's role in shaping the public perception of leadership. Through her social engagements and correspondence, she helped cultivate an image of the Adams presidency that was both respectable and thoughtful. Abigail understood the importance of reputation in political life and used her influence to ensure that her husband's actions aligned with the values of integrity, civility, and principle. By maintaining a household and social environment that embodied these qualities, she indirectly reinforced John's credibility and authority as a national leader. Abigail's influence was not limited to policy advice. She also played a critical role in supporting John's emotional well-being. The pressures of the presidency, political rivalries, public scrutiny, and the weight of decision-making were immense. Abigail's letters provided reassurance, encouragement, and perspective, helping John navigate the challenges of his office. Her ability to combine personal support with intellectual engagement strengthened their partnership and allowed John to approach the presidency with greater confidence and clarity. In addition to her direct impact on John Adams, Abigail contributed to the broader political discourse through her reflections on society and governance. Her letters touched on issues such as education, justice, and the role of women, often presenting ideas that were ahead of her time. While her recommendations were sometimes ignored in the moment, they provided a moral and intellectual framework that shaped John's thinking and, indirectly, public policy. Abigail's capacity to link domestic experience with national issues exemplified her unique position as an advisor who bridged private life and public affairs. Abigail's correspondence with John during the presidency also demonstrated her strategic acumen. She understood the limitations of her official role and used letters as a means to influence decisions without overstepping societal expectations. Through careful phrasing, logical argumentation, and appeals to shared values, she effectively guided John's thinking on complex matters. These letters reveal a woman attuned to both the mechanics of government and the subtleties of human behavior, capable of shaping political outcomes through intellect and persuasion, rather than formal authority. One area in which Abigail's influence was particularly notable was in foreign affairs and diplomacy. John Adams faced challenges related to relations with France, Britain, and other nations during his presidency, and Abigail's observations often helped him anticipate public reactions, consider ethical implications, and weigh practical consequences. She encouraged prudence, fairness, and moral clarity, qualities that informed John's approach to negotiation and policymaking. Her perspective, grounded in both reason and empathy, complemented his legalistic and strategic thinking, creating a partnership that strengthened decision-making at the highest levels. Abigail also continued her advocacy for women's concerns, reflecting a consistent theme throughout her life. While the early American political system excluded women from formal participation, Abigail used her influence to highlight the importance of education, justice, and recognition for women. Her letters frequently reminded John to consider these issues when crafting laws and policies, demonstrating her commitment to principles of equity and moral responsibility. Though the impact of these appeals was gradual and indirect, they exemplified her foresight and courage in addressing social inequalities. During John Adams' presidency, Abigail also demonstrated a keen understanding of political strategy and public opinion. She monitored how policies were received by citizens, commented on partisan dynamics, and anticipated the consequences of controversial decisions. Her ability to provide this perspective from outside the formal corridors of power made her an invaluable counselor. John Adams often reflected on her advice, acknowledging her insight and judgment, and relying on her perspective to navigate the complex political environment of the early republic. Another dimension of Abigail's role was her ability to balance public and private responsibilities. She managed family life, oversaw domestic affairs, and maintained correspondence while engaging in political discourse. This balancing act required both skill and foresight, as she needed to maintain propriety and discretion while exerting influence. Her success in this domain illustrates her strategic understanding of power, influence, and the constraints imposed by societal expectations on women in positions of informal authority. Abigail's influence during the presidency can also be seen in her moral and philosophical guidance. She encouraged John to act with honesty, integrity, and compassion, reminding him of the broader principles that should guide governance. This guidance extended to both domestic policy and foreign relations, reflecting her holistic approach to leadership. By emphasizing ethical considerations alongside practical strategy, Abigail helped ensure that her husband's decisions were informed by both principle and pragmatism. In addition to her advisory role, Abigail continued to document the life of the presidency through her letters, providing historians with a rich record of the early American political landscape. Her observations included reflections on social life, political debates, legislative challenges, and the human dimensions of leadership. These writings not only provide insight into John Adams' administration, but also offer a perspective on governance from a woman's viewpoint, one that combines personal experience, moral reasoning, and political acumen. Abigail Adams' influence during John Adams' presidency was profound and multifaceted. She was a trusted advisor, a moral compass, a chronicler of public life, and a social strategist. Her intelligence, judgment, and empathy shaped both John Adams' decision-making and the broader perception of his administration. Through her letters, her guidance, and her example, Abigail demonstrated that the role of the First Lady, though undefined at the time, could be a position of significant impact. Her legacy from this period highlights the importance of moral clarity, intellectual engagement, and partnership in leadership. As the presidency concluded, Abigail's influence did not diminish. Her ongoing correspondence, reflections on political and social issues, and guidance on public and private matters ensured that her perspective remained integral to John Adams' legacy. Abigail Adams' life and work left a profound and enduring mark on American history. Her influence extended beyond the private sphere of marriage into the very fabric of political and social life in the early republic. Though she never held elected office or formal power, Abigail's guidance, moral clarity, and correspondence shaped the decisions of John Adams, the presidency, and the broader course of American governance. Her legacy is multifaceted, encompassing her impact on her husband, the evolving role of the First Lady, and the recognition of women's contributions in a society that often overlooked them. One of the most direct aspects of Abigail's legacy was her impact on John Adams. Throughout their marriage, Abigail consistently provided counsel that influenced his political thinking, ethical judgments, and public decision-making. Her insights were particularly valuable during critical moments in American history, such as the drafting of foundational laws, negotiations with foreign powers, and the formation of early national policy. John Adams' letters and writings frequently reference Abigail's advice, demonstrating the weight he placed on her judgment. In many ways, her perspective helped shape the moral and intellectual contours of his presidency, reinforcing principles of justice, prudence, and empathy in his governance. Abigail's influence on John Adams also extended to his personal development as a leader. Her moral guidance, encouragement, and candid critique strengthened his resolve and helped him navigate the pressures of public life. She reminded him of the importance of integrity, ethical responsibility, and consideration for ordinary citizens, values that informed both his domestic and foreign policies. By supporting him emotionally and intellectually, Abigail ensured that John could approach leadership with confidence, clarity, and moral purpose. Her contributions were not always visible to the public, but were essential to the effectiveness of his presidency and political career. Another significant dimension of Abigail's legacy is her impact on the role of the First Lady. As only the second woman to occupy this position, she helped define what it could entail. While the position was informal and lacked the ceremonial or institutional frameworks of today, Abigail approached it with intelligence, discretion, and influence. She combined social responsibility, political insight, and moral guidance in ways that set a precedent for her successors. Her approach demonstrated that the First Lady could play a meaningful role in shaping policy, advising the president, and contributing to public life, even within the constraints of an era that limited women's formal authority. Abigail also left a lasting legacy through her letters and writings, which provide historians with a vivid account of the social, political, and personal dimensions of early American life. Her correspondence reveals the daily realities of running a household, raising children, and managing finances during periods of war and political uncertainty. At the same time, her letters document debates on governance, diplomacy, and social justice, offering a rare perspective from a woman who was both an observer and a participant in the political world. These writings have become a crucial resource for understanding the early republic, demonstrating the value of personal narratives in shaping historical knowledge. In addition to her direct influence on policy and historical record, Abigail contributed to the advancement of women's voices in public life. She may not have lived to see widespread recognition of women's rights, but her advocacy and reflections planted seeds for future generations. Her famous admonition to remember the ladies during the drafting of new laws reflects an early awareness of gender inequalities and a willingness to address them. Throughout her life, she consistently emphasized the importance of education, moral responsibility, and the participation of women in shaping society, even when constrained by the norms of her time. This forward-looking vision positions her as a precursor to later movements advocating for women's rights and social equity. Abigail's legacy also includes her contributions to civic and moral discourse. She consistently reminded John and others of the ethical obligations of leadership, the importance of justice, and the need for prudence in governance. Her emphasis on the human impact of political decisions reflected a broader understanding of civic responsibility, one that connected the private experiences of families and communities to the larger framework of national policy. Through this lens, Abigail's work exemplifies the integration of moral philosophy with practical politics, demonstrating how personal conviction can shape public leadership. Furthermore, Abigail's life illustrates the power of partnership and collaboration. Her influence was exercised primarily through her relationship with John Adams, highlighting how personal alliances can extend into public impact. Her intellectual and moral contributions show that leadership is not solely the product of formal authority, but can also be cultivated through dialogue, guidance, and shared responsibility. This aspect of her legacy underscores the significance of behind-the-scenes influence and challenges conventional narratives that often marginalize women's roles in shaping history. Abigail's legacy is also evident in the historical recognition and continued study of her life. Historians, biographers, and scholars have highlighted her contributions as both a political advisor and a chronicler of the early American Republic. Her letters are studied for their insight into political thought, social norms, and the lived experiences of women in the 18th century. By preserving and analyzing her writings, historians acknowledge Abigail's role as a vital participant in the formation of American government and society, ensuring that her voice remains part of the historical record. Abigail's influence extends into the cultural understanding of the early presidency and the role of women in history. She exemplifies how intellect, moral courage, and practical skill can shape leadership, policy, and society, even in the absence of formal authority. Her life challenges assumptions about the limits of women's influence in public life and highlights the importance of personal character, partnership, and moral clarity in shaping historical outcomes. In this sense, Abigail Adams' legacy is not only historical but also inspirational, offering a model of engagement, foresight, and principled action that continues to resonate today. Abigail Adams' legacy is multidimensional. It encompasses her direct impact on John Adams and his presidency, her contributions to defining the role of the First Lady, her advocacy for women's interests, and her enduring presence in historical scholarship through her letters and writings. Her life demonstrates the power of intellect, moral conviction, and partnership in shaping history. Abigail's contributions remind us that leadership and influence can take many forms, often operating behind the scenes but leaving an indelible mark on society, governance, and cultural memory. As we reflect on Abigail Adams' legacy, it becomes clear that her influence extended beyond her lifetime and immediate circumstances. Her life serves as a bridge between the private and public spheres, illustrating how personal insight, moral guidance, and intellectual engagement can shape national history. Abigail Adams' life reflects several central themes that shaped her influence, her legacy, and her role in early American history. These themes, partnership and marriage, advocacy for women, political insight, moral guidance, and resilience, interweave throughout her life story and illuminate why she remains a significant figure in the historical record. Understanding these themes allows us to appreciate Abigail not merely as the wife of a president, but as an intellectual, advisor, and moral voice in a formative period of the United States. One of the most consistent themes in Abigail's life is partnership and marriage. From the earliest days of her union with John Adams, she approached their relationship as an intellectual and emotional partnership. Unlike many marriages of her era, which were often defined by economic necessity or social convention, Abigail and John cultivated a relationship grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and open communication. Their extensive correspondence demonstrates that Abigail was not only a confidant, but also a counselor whose perspectives shaped John's thinking on personal, political, and ethical matters. This theme of partnership underscores the importance of collaboration and shared responsibility in leadership, showing that influence can arise through dialogue, trust, and mutual respect, rather than formal authority alone. Closely connected to partnership is the theme of advocacy for women. Abigail's writings reveal a consistent concern for the rights, education, and social standing of women. Her famous admonition to remember the ladies reflects both wit and moral seriousness, highlighting her awareness that the newly forming nation should consider the interests and welfare of women. Throughout her life, Abigail advocated for fairness and equity, using her position as a trusted advisor to promote awareness of women's concerns. Though limited by the societal norms of the 18th century, her advocacy was forward-looking and influential, providing a moral framework for later generations of women who would continue the struggle for recognition and rights. Another prominent theme is political insight and engagement. Abigail was unusually well-informed for a woman of her time, with knowledge of history, philosophy, and contemporary political thought. She applied this understanding in her correspondence with John Adams, offering advice on legislative matters, foreign policy, and social issues. Abigail combined intellectual rigor with practical reasoning, considering both the immediate consequences and the long-term implications of political decisions. Her engagement demonstrates that influence is not confined to formal office or public visibility. It can operate through careful observation, strategic communication, and reasoned argument. Abigail's political insight highlights the broader theme of women's indirect but substantial impact on the early republic. Moral guidance is another defining theme in Abigail's life. She consistently emphasized integrity, justice, and ethical responsibility, serving as a moral compass for her husband and, by extension, for early American governance. Her letters and counsel frequently reminded John Adams to consider the human consequences of his decisions, advocating for policies that reflected fairness and compassion. Abigail's emphasis on moral principles shaped the tone and substance of John's leadership, illustrating how ethical considerations can influence political decision-making. This theme also underscores her role as a thinker whose concern extended beyond immediate political pragmatism to encompass broader principles of justice and civic responsibility. Resilience and adaptability emerge as additional themes that define Abigail's life. She faced prolonged separations from her husband during the Revolutionary War and his diplomatic missions, managed households under challenging circumstances, and navigated the social and political pressures of the early presidency. Throughout these trials, Abigail demonstrated exceptional strength, practical wisdom, and emotional stability. Her resilience allowed her to manage complex responsibilities while maintaining her intellectual engagement and moral clarity. This theme reinforces the notion that leadership and influence are often exercised through persistence, strategic thinking, and the ability to navigate adversity with grace and foresight. Another recurring theme is the importance of correspondence and communication. Abigail's letters were not merely personal notes. They were tools for shaping thought, offering counsel, and recording historical events. Her writing reflects clarity, precision, and persuasiveness, showing that communication can be a form of power, even when conventional authority is absent. Through her letters, Abigail connected domestic life with political affairs, private reflection with public discourse, and personal emotion with intellectual argument. This theme highlights her skill in bridging worlds, private and public, personal and political, demonstrating that influence often flows through thoughtful communication and careful expression of ideas. The theme of education and lifelong learning also pervades Abigail's life. From her early years, she valued knowledge, critical thinking, and intellectual engagement. She pursued learning independently, reading extensively and reflecting on ideas that shaped her worldview. This intellectual foundation allowed her to participate meaningfully in political discourse, offer informed advice, and challenge societal norms. Her commitment to education exemplifies the transformative power of knowledge, showing how intellectual preparation can enable influence, leadership, and moral guidance, even in contexts where formal authority is limited. Abigail's life illustrates the theme of legacy and historical memory. Through her letters, counsel, and example, she left a record that informs our understanding of the early American Republic and the role of women in shaping its development. Her life demonstrates that influence extends beyond immediate action to the preservation of ideas, values, and insights for future generations. Abigail's story challenges traditional narratives that marginalize women's contributions, reminding us that the shaping of history often involves collaboration, guidance, and moral conviction, as much as formal power or public recognition. The central themes of Abigail Adams' life: partnership, advocacy for women, political insight, moral guidance, resilience, communication, education, and legacy, interconnect to create a portrait of a woman whose influence transcended the limitations of her era. These themes reveal how Abigail's intellect, moral clarity, and practical wisdom shaped her husband, the presidency, and early American society. They also demonstrate that her contributions were not confined to her immediate context, but continue to resonate as examples of principled action, thoughtful counsel, and the enduring power of personal influence. Abigail Adams' life stands as a remarkable testament to the power of intellect, moral conviction, and partnership. From her early years in Massachusetts to her influential role during the American Revolution and John Adams' presidency, she consistently demonstrated a capacity for insight, resilience, and moral guidance that shaped not only her family, but also the emerging United States. In examining her enduring significance, it becomes clear that Abigail's contributions extend beyond historical curiosity. They offer lessons about leadership, influence, and the ways in which women, even without formal authority, can shape the course of history. One of the most striking aspects of Abigail's legacy is her intellectual partnership with John Adams. Their correspondence, spanning decades, reflects a dynamic in which ideas were exchanged, debated, and refined. Abigail's counsel influenced John's thinking on critical matters of governance, law, and diplomacy, providing him with perspectives grounded in both moral reasoning and practical observation. This partnership exemplifies the principle that influence is not solely the product of formal office or visible power. Through thoughtful engagement, dialogue, and moral persuasion, Abigail shaped political decisions that would affect the nation for generations. Her role as advisor illustrates the subtle yet profound ways in which individuals can impact public life. Abigail's life also highlights the importance of moral clarity in leadership. She consistently emphasized ethical responsibility, fairness, and justice, reminding John and indirectly, the nation that decisions must consider their human and social consequences. Her advocacy for the rights of women and the ethical treatment of all citizens reflects a forward-thinking approach to governance. Abigail's insistence on justice and her attention to the moral dimensions of political action underscore the enduring relevance of her guidance. Leadership, she demonstrated, requires not only strategic acumen but also a commitment to principle. A further dimension of her significance lies in her role as a pioneer in shaping the position of the First Lady. Abigail Adams demonstrated that this role, though informal, could be one of influence, insight, and responsibility. Through her correspondence, social engagement, and moral guidance, she provided a model for subsequent First Ladies, showing that they could contribute meaningfully to policy, diplomacy, and public life. Her approach combined discretion, intelligence, and practical wisdom, setting a precedent for how women could exert influence in the highest circles of government without formal office. In this sense, Abigail's life contributed to the evolving understanding of the intersection between gender, power, and civic responsibility. Abigail's enduring significance is also evident in her advocacy for women's awareness and rights, even within the constraints of her time. Her famous admonition to remember the ladies captures her recognition of gender disparities and her willingness to address them directly. While her immediate impact on women's legal and political status was limited, her ideas resonated with later generations and contributed to the early dialogue about gender equity in America. Abigail's advocacy illustrates the enduring power of ideas and moral vision in shaping social consciousness, showing that influence can precede institutional change and lay the groundwork for future reform. Her legacy is further strengthened by her documented observations of early American society, particularly through her letters. Abigail's correspondence provides historians and scholars with a unique window into the political, social, and domestic realities of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Through her detailed accounts, we gain insight into the challenges of leadership, the complexities of family life during wartime, and the perspectives of women navigating a male-dominated society. This historical record ensures that Abigail's voice continues to inform contemporary understanding of the early republic and the crucial role women played, often behind the scenes, in shaping its development. Another element of her significance is her example of resilience and practical intelligence. Abigail navigated periods of separation from her husband, financial uncertainty, and the social pressures of public life with remarkable composure and effectiveness. Her ability to manage these challenges while maintaining intellectual engagement, moral guidance, and emotional support illustrates her extraordinary capacity for leadership in both private and public spheres. This resilience offers an enduring lesson. Influence often emerges not only from visibility or formal authority, but from the consistent application of intellect, moral judgment, and practical skill in the face of adversity. Abigail Adams' life also emphasizes the power of communication as a tool of influence. Her letters, written with clarity, insight, and persuasiveness, allowed her to shape political discourse and guide decision-making without holding formal office. This demonstrates that the written word, combined with thoughtful reasoning and moral conviction, can be a formidable instrument in shaping history. Abigail's correspondence underscores the idea that influence is multifaceted, extending through dialogue, mentorship, and the careful articulation of ideas. In a broader sense, Abigail's significance lies in her example of principled engagement with the world. She balanced personal responsibilities, family life, and social obligations with intellectual and moral pursuits, showing that effective influence requires the integration of multiple domains. Her life teaches that leadership is not only exercised in public office but also through the cultivation of knowledge, the provision of counsel, and the application of ethical reasoning in everyday decision-making. Abigail's legacy, therefore, extends beyond her immediate historical context to offer lessons about civic responsibility, partnership, and moral courage. Abigail Adams' enduring significance is reflected in the recognition and respect she continues to receive in historical scholarship. Historians, biographers, and educators celebrate her for her intellect, moral insight, and influence on the early republic. Her life challenges traditional narratives that marginalize women's roles in history, demonstrating that women have always shaped political, social, and cultural life in significant ways. By examining her correspondence, actions, and principles, we gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of American history and the complex interplay between private influence and public governance. Abigail Adams' life embodies the power of intellect, moral conviction, and partnership. Her influence on John Adams, her role as a pioneering First Lady, her advocacy for women, and her enduring record as a chronicler of early American society demonstrate the breadth and depth of her contributions. Through resilience, insight, and principled engagement, Abigail shaped not only the decisions of a president, but also the moral and intellectual foundations of the nation. Her legacy continues to inspire, offering timeless lessons about leadership, influence, and the capacity of individuals to make a meaningful impact in both private and public spheres. Abigail Adams remains a symbol of wisdom, foresight, and moral courage, a figure whose life reminds us that influence and leadership can take many forms, often operating quietly but leaving an indelible mark on history.